Hey everybody, how the hell are you? Welcome to the show. I'm your host, Scott Horton. This is my show, The Scott Horton Show. Appreciate you tuning in. Bear with me 1 second while I join up the chat room. Hey, you can join me. Go to scotthorton.org, and right there at the top of the page in big yellow letters it says, join up the chat room. Well, click on that, and all it is a nickname and a CAPTCHA, and you're in. No longer do you need a Pigeon or a XChat or a Chatzilla or any kind of thing. You can just open up a plain old browser window and hang out in the chat room with the boys. There's already a few hanging out in there. Good morning, everybody. Well, good morning to me. Good afternoon to probably quite a few of you, but anyway. All right, so it's the show. Hey, listen, Jeremy Sapiens, that guy's funny. I got Jack's joke. I just didn't have time to respond. I was trying to formulate, well, look, it's still morning to me, like I said. I was trying to formulate in my brain a way to answer back about the Zimmerman thing. He made a crack about, what do you mean you're covering the Bradley Manning trial instead of the George Zimmerman? Is it George? Instead of the Zimmerman trial. And I was going to say something. I was trying to put it together with my dumb, stupid brain about, yeah, don't you hate that about CNN? All day long they want to talk about George Zimmerman. And the, wait, isn't that a character from Airplane? Or is that Airplane 2? Oh, that was George Zimmer. Or George Zim. Oh, no, that was George Zip. Wait. George Zip said that about me? I forget. Anyway. I put out a tweet yesterday screaming at CNN in all capital letters about how I hate their stupid coverage of the Zimmerman trial and of the racist cook lady. Oh my God. Guess what? There's this racist cook lady, and she said some racist things, and so now she's got to go. Or does she? Oh. How intriguing. Yeah, we better keep up with every shade of possible spin on this late-breaking development. Every half hour on the half hour. I hate that one even more than this stupid Zimmerman thing. But it just goes to show the Bill Hixian thesis that TV is a plot against you. It's not just that they're not looking out for you. It's that they're trying to get you to pay attention to the wrong trial. That's the joke that Jack was making. I was just way too slow on the draw this morning. But anyway. All right. I am Scott Horton. I got a show for you today. I hope that this guy will get back to me. There's a guy from The Atlantic that did sort of a what we learned so far from the Greenwald revelations, from the Snowden revelations. And I could use some help along those lines, keeping track of it all. And I thought it'd make for a good interview. I haven't heard back from the guy. It was a very short notice kind of thing. Hopefully we'll be able to do it later in the week, if not at the bottom of the hour. But then later on, we got Nathan Fuller with all the latest from the Bradley Manning trial. And he's doing a really great job over there at bradleymanning.org, by the way, at keeping track of this stuff for us. So I do hope that you'll support bradleymanning.org, and I hope that you will take a look at Fuller's journalism there. And then also Stephen Zunes will be here, and he's got an article for Truth Out about Susan Rice, the new National Security Advisor, and what a horrible warmonger she is. She might as well be Condoleezza Rice. Isn't that funny? Two black ladies named Rice in the National Security Advisor spot, one president after the other. No relation? They're not even cousins or anything, apparently. Well, I guess maybe I'm talking out of my hat there and I don't really know, but I think that's what I heard before. Just a coincidence. They're both named Rice. Just coincidence. They're both horrible people. Horrible, blood-soaked, lying warmongers. So, anyway, Stephen Zunes will be on the air a little bit later to talk about that. Tomorrow, Daniel Larison will be here to talk about the Republicans and the jihad in Syria. Chase Madar will be here Friday to give us his latest on the Bradley Manning trial. And also Trevor Timm, I'm not sure, Thursday or Friday, possibly tomorrow. Possibly Thursday or Friday, we'll have Trevor Timm from the Electronic Frontier Foundation back on the show to explain what the hell. There's so much going on. And of course, the chase of Edward Snowden across the planet is sucking up all the attention from the NSA story, which I would prefer to pay more attention to, but, anyway. Okay, so at least we've got an hour worth of interviews coming up, which means I got a lot of news to cover here, a lot of things to say. I'm going to go ahead and say about the Michael Hastings thing that, my suspicions about what happened to him, they keep waxing and waning. I'm not really learning anything new I don't think I can pass on to you. I mean, I posted a thing yesterday on my Facebook page that Richard Clark, the former head of counterterrorism, says that, the government can't hack a car. And they could make it do things like accelerate out of control or maybe set off the airbag to make you lose control. And I've talked with a couple of car experts I know, one of whom is a political guy, another of whom is just a car guy. And nobody's certain, but that's the whole thing about it. If it was an assassination, if they did, in fact, they being my guess would be on McChrystal's men in the Delta Force, the Joint Special Operations Command. If they did it, it's as deniable as can be, right? And they might not have even needed to break in and add a microchip to a slot anywhere, although that probably wouldn't have been very hard. I know that I guess I don't know this, but I've heard, and it certainly sounds plausible to me, that the FBI has a black box that can, gain remote entry to any car that has remote entry access. Any modern remote unlocking system. So it wouldn't be hard for them even to add a chip to his computer, maybe to his car's computer. Maybe he could, maybe they could just do it by remote. I don't know. But he was driving a brand new Mercedes where the gas pedal and the throttle are connected only by digits, not by mechanics. Now, that's not true with the steering or the braking. They are, electronically assisted, but they are still, and I've been talking to car experts about this, okay? They are still mechanically, they matter. If the chip was screwing up one way or the other, you slam on the brakes, you slam on the brakes. Maybe the analog system will be, ineffective or something like that, but the brakes will still go. It's still a mechanical process there. The throttle, on the other hand, they could pretty much throttle that out of control and then set off the airbag. Some JSOC goon remote controls your car up to 100 miles an hour down a 45 mile an hour street and then blows your airbag on you. You're going to lose control of your car, right? Something like that. And again, and I'm not trying to just be a warmonger here, and in fact, shame on those who just pretend to know and make declarative statements about how obvious it is what definitely happened here and whatever. I hate that, man. It makes me sick. And I actually knew Michael Hastings. His life mattered to me. It wasn't just, I wonder if I can make an extra $60 on Google ad clicks if I talk out of my hat about it. But if they kill them, it's basically impossible to prove. And, of course, the LAPD won't be looking for evidence of a hacked computer, and how could they know anyway after a fire like that? And I don't know. The truth of the matter is, if Michael Hastings had stubbed his toe and fell and hit his head and died, he would have been in the middle of a story on JSOC, the CIA, Jill Kelly, whoever. He would have been under heat and pressure from federal agents following him, harassing him, tapping his phone, reading his emails. Anyway, for the rest of his life. That's who Michael Hastings was. He was a badass. And he didn't mess around with silly stories. He messed around with the JSOC. And as he reported in his book, they told him to his face, if we don't like what you write, we'll kill you. As far as I know, that was not, there was no indication in the text that he took that as a joke. I don't know whether they slapped him on the back and they all shared a good laugh and a drink after that or what, but... And it's true, as my wife wrote on her Facebook page, that in America, it's at least extraordinarily rare, if not never, that journalists are whacked by the state. Now, our government kills foreign journalists all the time. Look at the Iraq War. But it's very rare, if ever, that they would go to the extraordinary length of murdering an American journalist. Doesn't mean that they wouldn't do it. It does mean that everybody should, try to withstand the temptation to go off half-cocked about what we don't really know. And, some of the things that I want to know are, well, what was he doing out at 4:30 in the morning? Was he meeting with a source? Was he drinking with friends? I used to live in L.A., and I used to love speeding around L.A., not necessarily down Highland. There's, whatever. I'm a red-blooded American male, and I like driving fast. And you know what? Michael Hastings was all those things, too. And, well, I don't know about whether he liked driving fast. He was a red-blooded American male. He may have liked driving fast. I'd like to know that, whether anybody who... honestly, I mostly got over that when I collected a certain number of tickets. At some point, I just started driving like a grandma, Had Michael Hastings gotten to that point in life yet? Or was he still, he liked throttling that Mercedes as fast as he could get it? One eyewitness said that they thought the car went airborne when he hit Melrose. Well, maybe that was it and he just lost control and it really was just an accident and an unfortunate one. And people say cars don't explode, but they also say you hit a tree going sideways at 100 miles an hour or whatever, 65. All bets are off. And also, you can see from the footage that he hit the fire hydrant first. And so that could have torn open fuel lines. I don't know. But that's the whole thing. I keep going back and forth on it. I'll never discourage anyone from speculating or from investigating and trying to find out answers to this. And I think it's fair to equally damn anyone who says that that's absolutely impossible and you're a jerk for even wondering and whatever, as well as those who claim that this is just an open and shut case for assassination and that it's impossible that anything else happened here, etc. like that. What's wrong with just being suspicious but holding your horses? And the thing is about it, Hastings was a badass, but he wasn't the only badass journalist in this country. There are a handful more. And, I think the chances are some of them are going to write about this, and they're going to write about, well, for example, who were the FBI agents that were going around questioning his people? He sent out an email saying, look out for the FBI. They're on my case and talking, asking about me and stuff. Maybe BuzzFlash headquarters should, work out how to deal with this now before they show up, something like that. The FBI denies that they were investigating Hastings at all. Now, I'm completely speculating and making this up. I have no reason whatsoever to really choose one or the other than my gut instinct, for some reason, believes that the FBI is telling the truth, that they weren't after him. Because that's a pretty easy one to get caught on. I don't know. Maybe that's not it. I think what's bothering me is that I think whatever my imagination tells me, my access to the force tells me, it wasn't FBI. It's the same people who killed him. and they weren't FBI. And if they had the cojones to pretend that they were FBI, then who does that narrow it down to? Again, I'm just speculating. I'm not pretending that I know this stuff for a fact, which is disgraceful for people to do when they don't know for a fact. But just for some reason, when the FBI said, hey, we weren't investigating him. I mean, we're going to wait and see what Leopold says. As he said on the show, he's got the FOIA requests and all that. But just somehow that struck me as true. Then, what does that mean? Does that mean it's a former Delta Force guy dressed up like an FBI agent? Walking around pretending to be one? I don't know. I don't know, man. It seems to me, though, Hastings should have not been driving a brand new, completely computer-controlled car. You know what I mean? In my truck, I pull my shifter out of gear. I am pulling the gearbox out of gear physically. I'm not asking a computer to please do it for me. And I think for anybody who does real-ass investigative journalism for a living, yeah, you need a car that you can pull out of gear physically, dude, or dudettes out there. None of this fly-by-wire crap. That's just me. All right. I don't know. Part of this, too, is I'm just bothered by this because I really liked Michael Hastings. And I told you before about this. I feel really stupid and guilty that I didn't keep interviewing him. He wrote this book, The Operators, which is right up my alley, man. Which I interviewed him about the article that the book is based on. That the book is the further development of it. But I just put it down for reasons I don't even remember. For another book or because I was just too caught up with something else. And so then I never interviewed him about the book. And then so I was too embarrassed to admit to him I didn't interview him about his book. Because we were like kind of pals, So I always thought, well, I'll just interview him once I finally get around to reading his book. And then like I told you, I even cleaned up the office a little bit. And I kind of sort of reorganized my to-read pile, which is a nightmare. And there's The Operators. And so I've been thinking to myself, man, I really got to finish that book and I really got to get Hastings back on the show. And then I can interview him about his Libya piece and then I can interview him about all this other stuff. And now he's dead and I'll never talk to him anymore because now he's dead. And I'm a stupid idiot because I quit interviewing him 2 years ago, not for any good reason, but just because I got behind on my own work, Stupid. And I think that the Joint Special Operations Command are ruthless killers. And I think they'll kill whoever they want. If your local sheriff can assassinate you with a bullet to the back of your head on the side of the road and get away with it scot-free, what do you think the Joint Special Operations Command can do to the journalists they hate the most? I guess, I have to assume that at least for now they wouldn't aim so low as to mess with little old me. But it's not because they could get in any trouble if they did. They're the JSOC, Or, the CIA or whoever. I'm of the opinion that there are pseudo-agencies that don't even really have acronyms, Who do you work for? DOD. You know what I mean? Well, let's see. My paycheck comes through housing and urban development. But I'm an assassin, okay? I kill reporters. There's some of that. I'm pretty sure. And I don't know. So, yeah, I'm Scott. I got a ton of news, and I'm going on too long about this. NSA stuff. I'm going to save the NSA stuff for the next half hour. Because I've got Israel stuff here. Islamic Jihad firing Gaza missiles to embarrass Hamas. Gaza missiles have virtually nothing to do with Israel. This is Jason Ditz at news.antiwar.com. Israel launched a sort of obligatory attack on the Gaza Strip overnight and has promised to keep doing so in the future. That's because it's a politically popular thing to do. Sorry. That's more because it's a politically popular thing to do, however, than having anything to do with the rocket fire in Gaza. Rather, the rocket fire is entirely about an internal rivalry in the tiny enclave between the Hamas government and the Islamic Jihad movement, which was reportedly behind the attacks. A top Islamic Jihad commander was killed in Gaza on Saturday, and the group severed ties with Hamas afterwards. The split set the stage for what could be open conflict between the two, except Hamas is much more powerful in Gaza, which is why missile strikes designed to embarrass Hamas's newly created anti-rocket force and likely to provoke Israel into striking Hamas targets because Israel leadership is nothing if not predictably violent. Islamic Jihad's rockets didn't even hit anything, as indeed most rockets barely stray over the border and land in empty fields. And yeah, I mean, I would say that's a liberal use of missiles. There are no missiles. You're talking 4th of July level firepower here from Islamic Jihad or Hamas. And, yeah, of course Israel hits Hamas targets and they say, oh, well, you're not doing enough to stop Islamic Jihad. Well, come on, man, they're trying. But Israel doesn't care about who's doing what, man. They want to take advantage of, I don't know what's so fun about bombing Gazans, but apparently it's a raucous good time for the Israeli population and the government employees as well. Here, Avigdor Lieberman, who Martin Peretz, neo-fascist, calls a neo-fascist, and pejoratively. He wasn't saying, yeah, this guy's a good pal of mine. He was saying, oh my God, this Lieberman guy makes me look like I care about human rights. Avigdor Lieberman, Israel needs to conquer and thoroughly cleanse the Gaza Strip. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's closest political ally has called for Israel to carry out a thorough cleansing of the Gaza Strip as a tenuous ceasefire between its Hamas rulers and the Jewish state frayed. Speaking on Israel radio, the far-right former foreign minister Avigdor Lieberman called for Israel to reconquer the crowded coastal enclave to avoid, quote, finding ourselves in 2 years with Hamas having aircraft and hundreds of missiles that will reach beyond Tel Aviv. Also, they'll have H-bombs and aircraft carriers, maybe. His comments came as the Israeli Air Force attacked targets in the Gaza Strip after 6 rockets were fired from Gaza into southern Israel in the early morning hours of Monday. Early hours of Monday morning. No one was injured. It was the first ceasefire breach since April. Mr. Lieberman suggested that neither the 8-day aerial campaign Israel launched in November with the stated goal of halting rockets from Gaza, nor the devastating Operation Cats led in 2008 and 2009, in which more than 1,100 Palestinians and 13 Israelis died, had proven effective at quelling the violence. Quote, without willingness to take things to their conclusion, we merely increased the threats, he said, adding that Hamas has no intention of coming to terms with the Jewish presence in the land of Israel, and therefore what is needed is to seriously consider conquering the Strip and carrying out a thorough cleansing. Yeah. That's funny that they don't, in the rest of that paragraph, explain how that's simply not true. That all they want is independence for the West Bank, the Gaza Strip, and East Jerusalem. That Hamas, never even mind Fatah and the Israeli sock puppets in charge of the Palestinian Authority in the West Bank, Hamas has said 100 times, including on Charlie Rose's show on PBS, that of course they're willing to recognize Israel within 1967 borders. Just end the occupation. So the entire Arab world is signed on to. It's called the Saudi Peace Plan. Just let them have the West Bank, the Gaza Strip, and East Jerusalem, and they will recognize Israel. Same thing Arafat said back in 1988. Oh, boo-hoo. Yeah, the land of Israel. Yeah, you're defining that a little bit broadly, huh? Hamas won't accept our occupation of the land of Israel. Where the land of Israel includes the Gaza Strip, which is not the land of Israel. It's just Palestinian land under military occupation. Surprised the Independent didn't help clear that up. They're generally pretty good on this stuff, but they're going to go ahead and let his assertion stand, I suppose. But anyway, so there you go. TV will never tell you this. Someone in a comment on one of my websites somewhere, Facebook or something, pointed out that, the History Channel, man, they'll cover Hitler all day long. They'll cover whatever, I forgot his other example. They'll cover the most obscure topics in the world. And they'll act like World War II never ended. But they will never, ever, ever run a documentary about the Palestinians. Not by anyone. According to the History Channel, I guess, since the issue never even comes up, I guess the default is Israel has always been there for 2,000 years as a Jewish state, uninterrupted, right? Either that or, well, it was a land without people for a people without land. Where Palestinians aren't human, but Arabs, which is some different species of being, right? But anyway, no, it's false what Lieberman claims, that Gaza needs to be cleansed of anything. It's also false that even Hamas, who, yes, in the past waged a suicide bombing campaign, but who since 2006 have been the democratically elected government of the Gaza Strip, which according to our government is everything. Well, at least that was their position until Hamas won the election that the Americans insisted they hold. But their position is not that Israel has to cease to exist. Their position is in the occupation that's not of the whole land since 48, but of the West Bank, the Gaza Strip, and East Jerusalem since 67. And it's a damn lie otherwise. Everybody who says otherwise is a liar. Okay? Oh, boo-hoo for poor little Israel. Holders of hundreds of atomic weapons, including thermonuclear H-bombs. Holders of hundreds of F-16 fighter bombers that you bought them. And the most technologically advanced and equipped and well-trained and well-funded military in the entire region. Oh, poor them. They're under occupation by the horrible Palestinians, I guess. And when will the Palestinians finally just stop being such vile racists and allow the Israelis to colonize the entire West Bank? And, cleanse them right out of existence. Tell you something, the reason the whole world disagrees with America and Israel on this is because America and Israel on this are completely and totally full of it. Everything they say is a damn lie. Their entire construction of the argument about the occupation of Palestine is a ridiculous farce. And no one believes it except stupid Americans with their stupid televisions and their bookshelves full of DVDs and toys. The West Bank? What's the West Bank? The West Bank of what? Do they have fractional reserve banking in the West Bank? Well, when are the Palestinians ever going to let the poor Israelis be free anyway? Only Americans think that. No one else in the whole world is so misinformed. In fact, the Israelis aren't so stupid. Just read Haaretz. Hell, read the Jerusalem Post. They've got a more honest discussion situation there. That's the more right-leaning paper. Ynet, even. All right, give me a sec. We'll be right back with more news and interviews right after this on Scott Horton Show. Scott Horton here for The Future of Freedom, the journal of the Future Freedom Foundation. Every month, Plumline individualist editor Sheldon Richmond brings you important news and opinions on policy by heroic FFF President Jacob Hornberger, hard-hitting journalist columnist James Bovard, and others from the best of the libertarian movement. The Future of Freedom tackles the most important issues facing our country, from the bankrupt and insane welfare and regulatory states to foreign wars and empire, the dismal state of our economy, and ongoing assaults on civil liberties. This society needs peace and freedom for prosperity to prevail. Subscribe to the Future of Freedom in print for just $25 a year or online for $15 a year at fff.org/subscribe. And hurry up, because this summer they'll be running my articles about the wars in Libya, Syria, and Somalia in the Future of Freedom too. That's fff.org/subscribe for the Future of Freedom. And tell them Scott sent you. Over at AIPAC, the leaders of the Israel lobby in Washington, D.C., they're constantly proclaiming unrivaled influence on Capitol Hill, and they should be proud. The NRA and AARP's efforts make them look like puppy dogs in comparison to the campaigns of intimidation regularly run by the neoconservatives and Israel firsters against their political enemies. But the Israel lobby does not remain unopposed. At the Council for the National Interest, they put America first, insisting on an end to the empire's unjustified support for Israel's aggression against its neighbors and those whose land it occupies, and pushing back against the lobby's determined campaign in favor of U.S. attacks against Israel's enemies. CNI also does groundbreaking work on the trouble with evangelical Christian Zionism and neocon-engineered Islamophobia and drumming up support for this costly and counterproductive policy. Please help support the efforts of the Council for the National Interest to create a peaceful, pro-American foreign policy. Just go to councilforthenationalinterest.org and click Donate under About Us at the top of the page. And thanks. Hey y'all, Scott Horton here for WallStreetWindow.com. Mike Swanson is a successful former hedge fund manager whose site is unique on the web. Subscribers are allowed a window into Mike's very real main account and receive announcements and explanations for all his market moves. The Federal Reserve has been inflating the money supply to finance the bank bailouts and terror war overseas. So Mike's betting on commodities, mining stocks, European markets, and other hedges against our depreciating dollar. Play along on paper or with real money, and then be your own judge of Mike's investment strategies. See what happens at WallStreetWindow.com. All right, y'all, welcome back to the thing here. Hey, Wolfgang in the chat room says, well, first of all, there's a guy named Joe Biggs who was a staff sergeant, I believe, and became friends with reporter Michael Hastings while he was embedded with his unit in Afghanistan. And this is the guy that forwarded the email to the LA Times where he was saying, hey, the heat's on me, FBI agents may be coming to talk to you, and I'm onto a hot story, I may be off the radar for a little while. So that's Joe Biggs, the friend of Hastings, the guy that exposed the group email that he had sent to his closest associates just before, a few hours before he died. And apparently someone asked this guy on Twitter. Man, I need to follow this Joe Biggs on Twitter. Somebody forward me his handle. Anyway, someone asked him, hey, did this guy like to drive fast while listening to loud music? Did he party much? And he responded, no, he drove like a grandma, not partying. Well, you know, I don't know how much he did or didn't party. But you know what? My first instinct would be, and you know what, this isn't everybody, okay? But usually, unless you're just the worst, if you're driving drunk, you drive extra careful, right? I mean, you got to be really wasted to just be like, I don't care, and just slam the pedal, and you know what I mean? Otherwise, you're mostly thinking, not just don't crash, but don't draw the attention of the cops. Don't get a DWI. Hands at 10 and 2. Check the rearview mirror every 15 seconds. You know? Isn't that how you drive drunk when you drive drunk? I've only driven drunk once or twice, but that's how I did it. In fact, I remember getting off the freeway and thinking, man, I'm a little drunk. I think I'm going to take the access road here because I can tell my reactions are a little bit delayed. I'm not much of a drinker, honestly, but Anyway, so this guy says, no, he drove like a grandma. I'll take his friend's word for that. And at some point, you get over driving fast just from the tickets, right? That's what happened to me. I don't know. My guess is that they did kill him. And that no one will ever be able to prove it. But you know what? I don't know that. I prefer waiting and seeing. I think there's going to be some good journalism coming on this. Don't you guys think so? I'm counting on it. All right. So listen, again, I'm not going to have time to do this. Man, damn it. I guess I really should make the show longer. Anyway, I don't know. So there's this thing. I really want you to look at it. I talked about it on the show yesterday. It's called, I Am Sorry That It Has Come to This. A Soldier's Last Words. It's by Daniel Summers. He was a JSOC, that's a Joint Special Operations Command operator, as they call themselves. An Iraq War veteran. And he killed himself last week. On June 10th. And then his family, his wife and his family, gave Gawker permission to publish his suicide note. I don't know whether that was what he meant to happen or not, but his wife and family thought it would be a good thing. And what the hell, I got time, I want to read it. This is Daniel Summers' suicide note. Just a little bit of reality of American foreign policy for those of you who like pretending that there ain't one. I'm sorry it has come to this. The fact is, for as long as I can remember, my motivation for getting up every day has been so that you would not have to bury me. As things have continued to get worse, it has become clear that this alone is not a sufficient reason to carry on. The fact is, I'm not getting better. I'm not going to get better, and I will most certainly deteriorate further as time goes on. From a logical standpoint, it is better to simply end things quickly and let any repercussions from that play out in the short term than to drag things out in the long term. You will perhaps be sad for a time, but over time you will forget and begin to carry on. Far better than to inflict my growing misery upon you for years and decades to come, dragging you down with me. It is because I love you that I cannot do this to you. You will come to see that it is a far better thing, as one day after another passes during which you do not have to worry about me or even give me a second thought. You will find that your world is better without me in it. I really have been trying to hang on for more than a decade now. Each day has been a testament to the extent to which I cared, suffered unspeakable horror as quietly as possible, so that you could feel as though I was still here for you. In truth, I was nothing more than a prop, filling space so that my absence would not be noted. In truth, I've already been absent for a long, long time. My body has become nothing but a cage, a source of pain and constant problems. The illness I have has caused me pain that not even the strongest medicines could dull, and there is no cure. All day, every day, a screaming agony in every nerve ending in my body. It is nothing short of torture. My mind is a wasteland, filled with visions of incredible horror, unceasing depression, and crippled anxiety. Even with all of the medications the doctors dare give, simple things that everyone else takes for granted are nearly impossible for me. I cannot laugh or cry. I can barely leave the house. I derive no pleasure from any activity. Everything simply comes down to passing time until I can sleep again. Now to sleep forever seems to be the most merciful thing. You must not blame yourself. The simple truth is this. During my first deployment, I was made to participate in things, the enormity of which is hard to describe. War crimes, crimes against humanity. though I did not participate willingly, and made what I thought was my best efforts to stop these events, there are some things that a person simply cannot come back from. I take some pride in that, actually, as to move on in life after being part of such a thing would be the mark of a sociopath in my mind. These things go far beyond what most are even aware of. To force me to do these things and then participate in the ensuing cover-up is more than any government has the right to demand. Then, the same government has turned around and abandoned me. They offer no help and actively block the pursuit of gaining outside help via their corrupt agents at the DEA. Any blame rests with them. Beyond that, there are a host of physical illnesses that have struck me down again and again, for which they also offer no help. There might be some progress by now if they had not spent nearly 20 years denying the illness that I and so many others were exposed to. Further complicating matters is the repeated and severe brain injuries to which I was subjected, which they also seem to be expending no effort into understanding. What is known is that each of these should have been cause enough for immediate medical attention, which was not rendered. Lastly, the DEA enters the picture again, as they have now managed to create such a culture of fear in the medical community that doctors are too scared to even take the necessary steps to control the symptoms. All under the guise of a completely manufactured, quote, overprescribing epidemic, which stands in stark relief to all of the legitimate research which shows the opposite to be true. Perhaps, with the right medication at the right doses, I could have bought a couple of decent years. But even that is too much to ask from a regime built upon the idea that suffering is noble and relief is just for the weak. However, when the challenges facing a person are already so great that all but the weakest would give up, these extra factors are enough to push a person over the edge. Is it any wonder that the latest figures show 22 veterans killing themselves each day? That is more veterans than children killed at Sandy Hook. Every single day. Where are the huge policy initiatives? Why isn't the president standing with those families at the State of the Union? Perhaps because we were not killed by a single lunatic, but rather by his own system of dehumanization, neglect, and indifference. It leaves us to where we all have to look forward to is constant pain, misery, poverty, and dishonor. I assure you that when the numbers do finally drop, it will merely be because those who were pushed the farthest are all already dead. And for what? Bush's religious lunacy? Cheney's ever-growing fortune and that of his corporate friends? Is that what we destroy lives for? Since then, I have tried everything to fill the void. I tried to move into a position of greater power and influence to try to right some of the wrongs. I deployed again, where I put a huge emphasis on saving lives. The fact of the matter, though, is that any new lives saved do not replace those who were murdered. It is an exercise in futility. Then I pursued replacing destruction with creation. For a time this provided a distraction, but it could not last. The fact is that any kind of ordinary life is an insult to those who died at my hand. How can I possibly go around like everyone else while the widows and orphans I created continue to struggle? If they could see me sitting here in suburbia in my comfortable home working on some music project, they would be outraged, and rightfully so. I thought perhaps I could make some headway with this film project, maybe even directly appealing to those I had wronged, exposing a greater truth, but that is also now being taken away from me. I fear that just as with everything else that requires the involvement of people who cannot understand by virtue of never having been there, it is going to fall apart as careers get in the way. The last thought that has occurred to me is of some kind of final mission. It is true that I have found I am capable of finding some kind of reprieve by doing things that are worthwhile on the scale of life and death. While it is a nice thought to consider doing some good with my skills, experience, and killer instinct, the truth is that isn't realistic. First, there are the logistics of financing and equipping my own operation, then is the near certainty of a grisly death, international incidents, and being branded a terrorist in the media that would follow. What is really stopping me, though, is that I am simply too sick to be effective in the field anymore. That, too, has been taken from me. Thus, I am left with basically nothing. Too trapped in a war to be at peace, too damaged to be at war. Abandoned by those who would take the easy route, and a liability to those who stick it out, and thus deserve better. So you see, not only am I better off dead, but the world is better without me in it. This is what brought me to my actual final mission. Not suicide, but a mercy killing. I know how to kill, and I know how to do it so that there is no pain whatsoever. It was quick, and I did not suffer. And above all, now I am free. I feel no more pain. I have no more nightmares or flashbacks or hallucinations. I'm no longer constantly depressed or afraid or worried. I am free. I ask that you be happy for me for that. It is perhaps the best break I could have hoped for. Please accept this and be glad for me. That's Daniel Summers at Gawker.com, his suicide note to his wife and his parents. It's really something else, isn't it? Hey, I'll Scott Horton here to tell you about this great new project, Listen and Think Audio at listenandthink.com. They've got 2 new audiobooks read by the deepest voice in libertarianism, the great historian Jeff Riggenbach. Our Last Hope, Rediscovering the Lost Path to Liberty by Michael Maharrey of the 10th Amendment Center is available now. And Beyond Democracy, co-authored by Frank Karsten of the Mises Institute Netherlands and journalist Carl Beckman, will be released this month. And they're only just getting started. So check out listenandthink.com. You may be able to get your first audiobook absolutely free. That's Listen and Think Audio at listenandthink.com. All right, y'all, let me tell you about Rocky Mountain Miners at RockyMountainMiners.com. They sell computers that are ready to mine Litecoins right out of the box. It's the Prospector. Oops, I should have faded that down a little better, huh? It's the Prospector. You don't have to be a mathematician or a level 12 computer genius to mine Bitcoins or Litecoins anymore. Go to RockyMountainMiners.com. They got an email and a phone number right there on the front page. They'll answer all your questions and work with you on whatever you need to know. Obviously, I would suggest that you do your research, learn everything you can about these cryptocurrencies and what it means to solve the math problems, to mine new credits into circulation and however all it works. It's obviously an expensive purchase, but I think one that will prove to be worth it. Check them out. It's RockyMountainMiners.com. If you use the promo code Scott Horton Show, you save $100 on the Prospector at RockyMountainMiners.com. All right. So, I was trying to get this guy, Alexis Madrigal, on the show to talk about the NSA thing that he did for the Atlantic. Let's see if I can get that going for tomorrow. Snowden still at Moscow airport, reports the BBC. You know, earlier The Guardian was saying, we're no longer sure he ever even came to Russia at all. Oh, no, Putin has confirmed. He's in the transit area. Yeah, see, I wondered about that. Lavrov, the foreign minister, said, well, he never crossed the border. Well, apparently they have this sort of no man's land transit zone where you're not technically in Russia if you're still in that part of the airport. You know what I mean? One of those sort of things. Like a foreign embassy. It's considered not quite Russian soil or whatever. See? It says right here. Because Mr. Snowden is in the pre-immigration area of the airport, he is technically not yet on Russian soil. The Russians have rejected American charges that they have assisted Mr. Snowden. Again, there's, as far as I know, no reason to believe he's told the Russian government or the Chinese government anything. Or, been debriefed by their intelligence agents. Obviously, he talked to the South China Morning Post about some of the things that the NSA was up to, but that's not the same thing at all. But anyway, I don't want to get too bogged down in that. I actually, what I want to do, you know what? I got 10 minutes. What am I going to do? See, what I wanted to do is read through a whole lot of these different NSA articles and really focus on the NSA revelations, But the problem is there's this huge war going on in Afghanistan I want to cover too. Afghan Taliban assault Kabul secure zone. Gun battle near U.S. Embassy in Kabul after suspected Taliban found with fake NATO IDs. Oh, I like this one from Jason Ditz at news.antiwar.com. Mass defections. Afghan diplomats just not coming back. This weekend was supposed to be a major reshuffle at the Afghan Foreign Ministry, where 105 diplomats deployed abroad were supposed to return from foreign postings to receive new assignments. Only 5 came back. The rest are applying for asylum. Amazing. Taliban denies claims that Qatar talks will be canceled. So here we go. It's not a very sophisticated construction, but one ain't necessary. You can see it with your own eyes. You got attacks going on in Kabul on almost a daily basis now. Remember when we talked to Con Hallinan a couple of weeks ago on the show, he was pointing out that one of these truck bombings, at least, was perpetrated by one government minister against another. It wasn't the Taliban at all. It was Gulbuddin Hekmatyar trying to score some points off of General Dostum. I guess they're having a contest for, who can rape and skin more innocents alive or, that kind of thing. America backs the communists in Kabul. I mean, there ain't much Marxist about them, but they sure do like gulagging people to death. And anyway, the Taliban... it's so funny to listen to the American media's spin. Hey, the Taliban wasn't supposed to call themselves the Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan, as though they're still the government of Afghanistan and always have been since 2001. Why, we can't negotiate with them in this situation. But the Taliban, they're in the catbird seat. They've been jerking everybody around, too, and making a kind of farce out of the whole thing. Sorry, I'm plagiarizing. I think it was the Washington Post I read. No. It was a McClatchy story about how the Taliban said, oh, okay, we'll take down our Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan flag from our new little consulate in Doha, Qatar, where we're doing these talks. But, they just put it on a lower flagpole. And then they took their sign and they moved it inside. I know this sounds like it's all stupid, but diplomacy is pretty stupid. And of course, it's everything to Karzai of whether, and to the Americans, whether the Taliban are showing up as the, bloodied and beaten, desperate militia, or whether they're just the government in waiting. Simply biding their time till the Americans finally up and leave, at which point they'll inherit the entire country. And, what do you think is the accurate spin? They're both just spin, right? But which is closer? It sure seems to me... Well, look, this is just a fact, okay? The Taliban were supposed to be beaten down, bloody, and dragged to the table, desperate, 2 years ago. The surge was supposed to go from the end of 2009 through halfway through 2011, at which point General Petraeus promised that the surge will have worked, will have taken the fire to the Taliban so badly they'll be begging to deal with us by July 2011. So now we are just short of 2 years later, and the Taliban are like, yep, that's right, you can call us the Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan. So now I know if you're a Republican, well, you just want to pretend this is all Barack Obama's fault since he's such a limp-wristed, sissy Democrat or something like that. But of course, it was George Bush who lost the war to the Taliban. He handed the country over to Barack Obama with the Taliban on the upswing back on January 2009. And then Obama did nothing but act just like Bush and make matters worse by escalating the number of troops in the country, which was, of course, what was responsible for the re-rise of the Taliban in the first place. Was the escalation of American forces there. And then it was every Republican's angels, David Petraeus, and then, you can cry that Michael Hastings destroyed Stanley McChrystal's career if you want, but then Obama quite cleverly demoted Petraeus and put him directly in charge of the Afghan war through the time when he was supposed to have won with that surge of his before moving him over to the CIA, where the CIA took him down in a coup d'etat because they didn't like him. And thank goodness for that. But anyway, it was every Republican's favorite general, every Republican's favorite candidate for 2016, because, American Republican, conservative Christian types, they don't actually care if their political leaders betray their wives anymore. Even their military men, honor bound and all of that, they don't care about that anymore. I mean, when Nelson Rockefeller dumped his wife for some floozy, that was the end of, his national political career anyway. That was a big deal back in 1964. But nowadays, that's the olden days. Nowadays, nobody cares about that, not on the right. But it was the Republicans' general who completely failed. I'm not trying to cover for Obama. He's completely blameful. I'm just saying I would hate to see Republicans blame Obama in a way that lets them off the hook for thinking that they could occupy and create a new state in Afghanistan in the first place. And then, I like accentuating the fact that it's their generals who blew it horribly. And so the Taliban, they didn't get bloodied and beaten and brought to the table ready to surrender to whatever American terms. The surge didn't work. America lost. A war that America had no right to win, so there you go. Go watch This Is What Winning Looks Like and tell me if you think that those soldiers have the right to win the mission that they're on. Installing what might be the first official child molester government in the history of the world, right? I mean, there's a lot of child rape in Pashtun culture anyway, because they got some sicko backwards-ass culture over there in Pashtunistan, man. But has anyone ever had an outright, since ancient Greece, since the Holy Roman Empire, has anybody had a government that was outright based on child rape? Until the American-installed government of Afghanistan today? It's just sick. This is what winning looks like. Go watch that. It's free on YouTube. It's a great journalist, Ben something or other, did this documentary for Vice magazine. Crazy, man. Crazy. And then, man, Syria news. I got no time for it. I'm going to go in just a second. There's so much Syria news and so much spying news and Libya news I didn't get to. The Syria news, I guess I'll just emphasize this one for you in Syria. Reuters.com analysis. Al-Qaeda's Syria rift may lead to open conflict among jihadis. This is Miriam Karanui or something. In Reuters.com, Al-Qaeda's Syria rift may lead to open conflict among jihadis. You ain't never read a Jean-Luc Picard facepalm like this in your life, man. Reuters.com. We'll be right back with Stephen Zunes right after this. late. Sure hope I can make my flight.
Stand there.
Me? I am standing here.
Come here.
Okay.
Hands up. Turn around.
Whoa, easy.
Into the scanner. Ooh, what's this in your pants?
Hey, slow down. It's just my...
Hold it right there. Your wallet has tripped the metal detector. What's this? The Bill of Rights?
That's right. It's just a harmless stainless steel business card-sized copy of the Bill of Rights from SecurityEdition.com. There for exposing the TSA as a bunch of liberty-destroying goons who've never protected anyone from anything. Sir, now give me back my wallet and get out of my way. Got a plane to catch.
Have a nice day.
Play a leading role in the security theater with the Bill of Rights Security Edition from SecurityEdition.com. It's the size of a business card, so it fits right in your wallet, and it's guaranteed to trip the metal detectors wherever the police state goes. That's SecurityEdition.com. And don't forget their great Fourth Amendment socks.
Hey guys, I got his laptop.
Admit it, our public debate has been reduced to reading each other's bumper stickers. Scott Horton here for LibertyStickers.com. I made up most of them, and most of those when I was mad as hell about something. So if you hate war, empire, central banking, cops, Republicans, Democrats, gun grabbers, and status of all stripes, go to LibertyStickers.com, and there's a good chance you'll find just what you need for the back of your truck. Own a bookstore? Sell guns at the show? Get the wholesaler's deal. Buy any 100 stickers and they drop down in price to $1 a piece. You can spread the contempt and make a little money too. That's LibertyStickers.com. Everyone else's stickers suck. Hey, you own a business? Maybe we should consider advertising on the show. See if we can make a little bit of money. My email address is scott@scotthorton.org. All right, y'all, welcome back to the show. I'm Scott Horton. And our first guest on the show today is our good friend Steven Zunes. This time writing at truthout.org, troubling implications of Susan Rice's appointment as National Security Advisor. Don't tell me that she's going to sit around and do nothing with her thumb up or something as a gigantic 9/11 attack happens on her watch. Like the last Rice National Security Advisor we had, or maybe she'll lie us into war with a country. Another one? Okay, sorry. Welcome back to the show, Stephen. How are you doing?
Very good, thank you.
This lady does like to lie us into war. Isn't she the one who claimed that Muammar Gaddafi was passing out Viagra to his military so that they could rape their way across Libya to Benghazi?
Yeah. Well, Samantha Power has been one who has supported this idea of humanitarian intervention. She was a big proponent of intervention in Bosnia, supported the intervention in Libya, and the like. At the same time, she's not a neoconservative, not an unrepentant hawk. In fact, she was a very outspoken opponent of the invasion of Iraq. She has been
wait a minute. We're talking about Susan Rice. We're talking about Samantha Power.
We're talking about Samantha Power.
Oh, okay.
Samantha Power. So she's more kind of a classic kind of liberal hawk, if you will, than a neocon. But so she's been somewhat nuanced, and some of her work on human rights has been admirable in my view, taking it more seriously than other people. But at the same time, she's one of those who is much more likely to criticize human rights abuses by governments we don't like than by governments we're allied with.
Yeah, I mean, she's the one who really. And I guess we'll get back to Susan Rice in a minute, but Samantha Power, probably, more famously, or she's sort of the leader right now in public opinion in D.C. anyway, elite opinion, pushing this narrative that the worst thing that happened during the Bush administration wasn't the strangling of 1 million Iraqis to death by Bill Clinton. It was his failure to intervene in Rwanda. And then that becomes the model for every other conflict in the world, including Syria today, that we have to intervene to protect the Hutus of tomorrow. Or the Tutsis,
Exactly. And she's been a big proponent of this, including taking a more active stance in terms of Darfur and the like. Definitely believes in a very assertive foreign policy, ostensibly in the cause of human rights.
Okay, and now she's now been moved up to UN ambassador from the position of Deputy Assistant Secretary of Nothing at the National Security Council. And she actually was cited complaining in Michael Hastings' great piece for Rolling Stone about the war in Libya that she was tired of being relegated to the bottom ranks of the National Security Council and teaching Iraqis how to paint schools and do-gooder rinky-dink stuff. That was the quote. She wanted attention. She wanted power and influence, and so she saw the basically Gaddafi's putting down of the protest movement in Libya as her chance to advance herself, and so mongered a war in Libya.
She was also, she had been very upset in many ways that the Obama administration had appointed a number of people who were to her right. That people like Hillary Clinton as Secretary of State. She was a very big critic of Clinton, especially for her support for the Iraq War. She saw herself, again, more as an idealist, more into seeing human rights as of a greater emphasis. So basically, we're seeing two kinds of interventionists here. We're seeing people like Hillary Clinton, who are getting the more conventional mainstream interventionist, and then you have Samantha Power that likes to put herself on a higher moral plane because saying this is not about empire, this is not about oil. I wouldn't support an Iraq type thing, but if there is a genocidal type situation, this is where we need to assert a military force. And then as far as just speaking personally, even though I very much, as you know, opposed the intervention in Libya, I very much opposed intervention in Syria. I could see theoretically in a situation, like Rwanda, where there was a clear-cut case of genocide, where some kind of humanitarian intervention might be appropriate, but in theory, but in practice, there's not a whole lot the United States can do realistically to prevent human rights abuses in countries we don't have much control over. However, if we're really concerned about human rights, what we should do first and foremost, before we even start talking about humanitarian intervention, before we even start talking about the responsibility to protect, we need to say, hey, where is the United States supporting repression? What about all these dictators that the United States is sending arms to? What about the frequent use of the veto power to protect Israel from condemnation for its engagement in war crimes? In other words, I think reasonable people can disagree about humanitarian intervention in certain cases. We shouldn't even. My big critique about Samantha Power is not her openness on that per se, but the fact that she is still part of the foreign policy establishment, which rationalizes for support for repressive dictatorships, sort of exposing this whole myth that we really do care about human rights in our foreign policy.
Yeah, and I mean, look, do-gooder rinky-dink stuff and her wanting a promotion and a pat on the head aside, I know people who at least have read her books and say, she really, really believes in this America as Superman to go save the day, and every crisis is another Rwanda, where the fact that we have no national interest there is what proves how moral and high-minded we are by intervening and all that kind of stuff. In essence, though, to the degree to which she believes all that stuff and repeats it, it's just PR for liberal support for the empire. This is a right-wing... This is a right-wing nationalist, imperialist, corporatist state at war. And yes, it's nice to have a little bit of baby blue window dressing and call it international law as you blow little children apart with your Hellfire missiles. And that's all she is just, she's just spin.
Yeah, in many ways she gives a liberal cover for this because she has, again, to her credit, taken some somewhat more independent, critical stances on things like Iraq and Israel and a few other things. That in many ways it gives her more credibility when she starts talking about the use of U.S. force other places.
Yeah, I mean, and it gives the empire credibility.
Exactly.
Yeah, not everybody up there is Donald Rumsfeld. They all just agree with everything that he would do somehow. Huh. That's funny. And yeah, of course, the splinter in your eye and never mind the plank in mine is the name of the same song that they just sing over and over again. Yeah. And then and especially look at the case of Libya where they sold that as some kind of humanitarian intervention when clearly it had nothing to do with that. It had everything to do with, as Hastings reported in that same article, had everything to do with Power getting a promotion, had everything to do with Hillary Clinton's point of view that we had a real bad PR, the empire had a real bad PR problem with our support for Mubarak that the people of Egypt wanted so badly to overthrow, and every other dictator in the region. And so they needed to overthrow an expendable puppet like Gaddafi, who wasn't that close of a friend, even though they had brought him in from the cold in 2003, just to try to make it look like America was on the side of the little guy in any case in the region.
Well said.
And, of course, the Chinese had oil interests there, and it's nice to not have that anymore, too.
Yeah, and it's especially having Samantha Power in a role like the United Nations is that in many ways is the public face of the United States in foreign policy, and because she has all this kind of human rights credibility in the eyes of some, she can get away, I think, with supporting policies in ways that a lot of people in the foreign policy establishment would not. At the same time, in terms of her own personal ambitions, one of the frustrating things about UN ambassador, of course, is that you pretty much do what the president says you should do, and they don't take a lot of initiative and leadership. So in many ways, I'm actually I'm less concerned about the Samantha Power appointment at the UN as I am about the Susan Rice appointment at the National Security Council.
Right. Well, and that was where I tried to start, but maybe you couldn't hear me. I was asking, isn't she the lady that lied us into war in Libya by telling the United Nations and therefore the American people by way of our uncritical media that Gaddafi was passing out Viagra to commit mass rape war crimes all the way to Benghazi?
Yeah, I don't remember that specific thing, but she definitely did hype the war in a big way. She was... and of course,
well, I got a funny story about that, Stephen. Let me tell you real quick. I was driving down Sunset listening to some right-wing Rush Limbaugh clone on the AM radio in L.A., and his whole thing was, even Susan Rice says that Gaddafi's mass raping everybody between Tripoli and Benghazi, and so that's how you know it's true, because of what a left-wing liberal she is.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So that's what we call confirmation bias. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. I'm concerned about Susan Rice on a number of things. One is that she is one of the more hawkish people vis-a-vis Israel and Palestine, very very close to to Netanyahu's perspectives. She has been highly undermined the United Nations left and right when it's tried to investigate well-documented war crimes by the Israeli government. She cast a veto for a very mildly worded resolution that simply reiterated the illegality of the Israeli settlements and simply called for a freeze, not even calling for their withdrawal as legally they're required to do, and as 4 previous UN Security Council resolutions did demand. Even Richard Nixon acknowledged that the Israeli settlements were illegal. And she's also cozied up to a number of rather notorious African dictatorships. When the dictator Ethiopia died a couple years ago, she had this eulogy about what a great man and good friend he was. She has supported...
Actually, stop right there, Stephen. Stephen, if you could, we got time. Why don't you go ahead and tell us what a great man Meles wasn't?
Yeah, well, certainly he had basically rigged elections, jailed opponents. Political repression and torture was widespread. The people had been thrilled back when the communist-led Derg had been thrown out in a popular revolution back in the early 1990s, but he had essentially, brought in a new one-party state and had really stifled the efforts of the Egyptians to try to build a more democratic society after years of war and communism, and then prior to that, years of a pretty reactionary emperor.
And can you talk about like some of the so-called cleansing of the Oromos and some of that? I lose track of all the different internal wars there.
Yeah, but the underlying, but the worst part actually, I think, is that there has been her support for the people that ended up being victorious in Rwanda. They threw out the genocidaires, which were good, but the RPF, the rebel group, has been supporting some pretty sketchy characters in the Congo, including a group that has committed a huge series of major atrocities. Killed not just UN forces, but killed, raped, plundered, hundreds of thousands of Congolese, and her rationalization for it was just ridiculous. She was saying, well, these guys would be killing each other anyway, so our support isn't making that big a difference. I mean, this kind of rationalization, and she really doesn't have an excuse here. I mean, a lot of people are just ignorant about Africa, but she actually served in the Clinton administration as Secretary of State for African Affairs, so she actually knows the continent. She knows who these people are. She is not being naive, and her proud accomplishments in the Clinton years was pushing certain neoliberal economic plans on the societies due to their poverty and dependency and experience with colonialism, ended up exacerbating their problems rather than helping them. So she's so even in her area of expertise, like Africa, where she's gotten some kudos in the past, there's quite a bit of controversy there as well.
Yeah. Now, if we can go back to 2011 and the war in Libya, there were a few different pieces like this. One of them in the Daily Beast, which is, I guess, Newsweek now, about the three women. It was Rice, Power, and Clinton, who got together and decided they really wanted to do this thing in Libya. And in fact, according to all press reports, as far as I know, never contradicted, over the objections of Defense Secretary Gates, who Obama had inherited from Bush, who was a George Bush Sr. Republican, basically. And they decided to do this thing. And so we already covered a couple of the motives. As I said, I'm pretty convinced that, and I think Hastings reported this, that Hillary really wanted to try to take control of the narrative and really, try to push that thing where America cares about the little guy, when in fact America supported every dictatorship that people were protesting against during that was the height of the Arab Spring.
Clinton was a big supporter of the monarchy in Bahrain, which was brutally suppressing a nonviolent pro-democracy struggle there. Right. No complaints when the Saudis invaded that island nation to help the regime suppress the popular uprising, even though in terms of the actual sheer numbers on the street relative to the population, as well as to its nonviolent discipline and the potential for various historical reasons for Bahrain actually to become a stable, democratic secular society. I mean, Bahrain had more hope than virtually any country there. And what was the United States' reaction to support the brutal suppression of the pro-democracy government, even as we were justifying intervention in Libya on the same grounds?
Yeah. Well, and right after they had just been completely clumsily caught out doing everything they could to keep Mubarak in Egypt, and then trying to settle for Omar Suleiman, his head of the secret torture police, and not even getting
Torture
him.
in chief, Suleiman,
right. Yeah. And but the thing of it is, and then obviously we talked about how Samantha Power, she didn't want to do good or rinky-dink stuff. She wanted attention and a promotion and things like that. So that was part, at least, of her motivation there, again, as reported by Hastings. But I think, somewhere in there we're talking about there's some true belief here that, yeah, this is like one of those Rwanda things. And this is the chance to demonstrate our wonderful idea of America really is Superman. And really our army does exist to go and save the day for people and whatever like that. But then, so the question I'm trying to get to, which I'm not very good at forming here, obviously, is something about how, yeah, but what about the enemy? The only enemies that the American people actually have, which is those who are willing to commit suicide trying to kill civilians of us, right? Like, those are the only real problematic problems that the American people face in the world, and that's who we fought the war for, was for the Libyan Islamic Fighting Group and the Libyan veterans of Al-Qaeda in Iraq. And didn't they know, just like in Syria now, don't they know that these are the Mujahideen? Don't they know that by overthrowing a secular commie, and I know he wasn't like a pure Marxist or whatever. He was basically an atheist, Gaddafi, compared certainly to what they've got now. And I mean, what in the world are they thinking? Are they just not taking that into account at all? Or they just think, wonderful, we'll have more crisis to exploit further on into Mali and Nigeria? Or what is it with these people, man? Help me.
I don't think, actually, the more I study the inner workings of U.S. foreign policy, the less prone I am to conspiracies and more I'm into the appreciating the role of ideology, that these guys really do believe a lot of their stuff. I mean, I think they really did think that they could establish a secular, stable, democratic Libya. And then on one level, the fact that they had relatively free and fair elections and they elected some fairly moderate secular forces to power, they say, hey, see, this worked. What they don't take into account, though, is out of a country of barely 6 million people, you have over 200,000 militiamen under arms, many of which are indeed part of these radical Salafi groups, some of which are affiliated with Al-Qaeda. You do not recognize this nice democratically elected secular governments, and they're basically running roughshod and doing things like they had, you had a number of people who are in high positions, very responsible, fairly moderate people, who like maybe in the early days of Gaddafi's regime had a role, say, as an ambassador or something like that, but then they eventually figured out Gaddafi was crazy and they resigned. But because of that short period of time, these radical armed people saying they cannot be part of this new government at all. And so the parliament was saying, no, let's try to find a compromise. This militia surrounds the parliament building, guns pointed, and said, pass this law or else. And they end up passing the law. And this is how these guys are operating. There was a big battle just a few months ago, battling over control of the Tripoli airport, because these rival militias were wanting to have their share of the spoils. I read a little item about some hotel where they were some militia leader hadn't paid his hotel bill in 6 months, and finally the hotel owner forced him to leave, and the guy came back with his militia that afternoon and totally shot up the place. And of course, what most Americans are familiar with the militias about were, of course, with the killing of the ambassador and 3 other Americans in Benghazi last summer. And while the Republicans are trying to manufacture a scandal on exaggerating and some of the details of those final hours, the big questions they should be asking are this. Why do we end up helping to support and foment a rebellion that led all these guys to get these guns and be capable of doing that kind of thing in the first place?
Exactly.
That's the big question. Furthermore, when people like Susan Power and others that would be a great massacre, they said that they could be as many as 10,000 people killed if we don't stop them. But it ends up in the war the U.S. supported, over 30,000 people were killed, and there's still people dying to this day.
Yeah, no, they claimed 100,000. So your point's still good, though. But it just makes their lie even more ridiculous. When Bill Clinton pretended 100,000 people had died civilians had died at the hands of the Serbs in Kosovo, at least he was pretending they had already died. In this case, they were just pretending that these people were going to die. Trust us, because we can see the future. Yeah. He's going to kill 100,000 men, women, and children if we don't stop him.
And the interesting thing about Kosovo, too, and you still hear this. Now, prior to the launch of the NATO bombing campaign in February of 1999, you had the Serbs were indeed engaged in some pretty brutal counterinsurgency kind of campaigns that were taking the lives of Kosovar civilians. But the full-scale ethnic cleansing did not begin until the NATO said, okay, all the OECD inspectors get out, we're going to start bombing, and they started bombing. That's when the ethnic cleansing began on a full scale. And that's and yet to this day you said, oh, NATO intervened in response to the ethnic cleansing. No, the ethnic cleansing, the full-scale ethnic cleansing, when you had hundreds of thousands of people being forced out and the really nasty stuff started, that was only after the bombing began. And indeed, statistically, empirically, people find that when there is third-party intervention, even in a humanitarian responsibility to protect kind of scenario, it virtually always increases the rate of killing, and it prolongs the conflict because the dictator was saying, oh, I have nothing to lose now. The gloves come completely off, and they go all out, and then the rebels say, hey, we don't need to compromise or negotiate because we have the back of these powerful Western powers. So it makes things so even if we were to assume this all has pure humanitarian intention, there's just not geopolitical or economic other things involved. Even if we assume the best of the Susan Powers and I think that Samantha Powers and Susan Rice and people like that, even using that kind of logic, that this kind of military intervention ends up costing more lives than it saves.
Yeah. Well, and then there's the interesting fact that they always still have to lie us into the war. And they never did find the 100,000 dead Kosovar men, women, and children. It was a few thousand. They were all fighting-age males. Whether they were armed at the time they were killed, I don't know. But as John Pilger reported then, the FBI packed up and went home after 2 weeks. They looked for the mass graves. There were no mass graves. The whole thing was just a Bill Clinton hoax, just like Waco, just like everything else. Just like Saddam's weapons of mass destruction that he kept bombing for 8 years in a row. That never existed. Well, hadn't since, before he took power anyway. But, anyway. Little side note there. There were no 100,000 bodies. Now, I don't know. I read a thing by Max Boot in the commentary saying, oh, thank God it's Susan Rice. She's going to save the day. She can lie us into war in Syria. We got to go and help the cannibal, suicide bomber, Zawahiri loving jihadists as fast as we can over there. And thank goodness we have her leadership now to help get it done. I'm paraphrasing roughly.
Yeah. It's not a... it's very. I mean, there are a whole number of areas I've been disappointed about Obama on, but I think the foreign policy realm, I think more than any other, because he ran as sort of the alternative, not just to Bush, but to traditional Democrats like Hillary Clinton as well. He said, if you elect me, you will not just end the war, but we'll end the mentality that led to the Iraq War in the first place. Yet the majority of the people he's appointed have been supporters of the Iraq War, and even people like Samantha Power, who opposed the war, is still one, as you have pointed out, who tends to be enthusiastic about the prospects of U.S. military intervention elsewhere.
Yep. Well, I don't agree with these two on everything, but it was pretty obvious in 2007. There were two honest men up on that stage, Kucinich and Gravel. Whatever else you think of them, they're decent men. And then they're the three lizard beings from beyond the moon or wherever they get these terrible senators. Clinton, Obama, and Edwards, all three of whom were completely and totally interchangeable with each other. The only thing about them was that they were all worse from each other than each other in 100 ways, but they were all indistinguishable from each other. Anybody who mistook and thought that Obama was over there in the category with Kucinich and Gravel must have been smoking crack. He's just tall black male Hillary Clinton is all he ever was. That's what I'm saying anyway. That's what I said in 07 when I first heard of him too. All right. Hey, thanks very much. I appreciate it, Stephen.
Yeah, my pleasure. Anytime.
All right, everybody. That's the great Stephen Zunes. He's at truthout.org with troubling implications of Susan Rice's appointment as National Security Advisor, especially on the Israel stuff. This is really good. Go take a look at it, would you? Truthout.org. We'll be right back. ScottHorton.org.
So you're a libertarian, and you don't believe the propaganda about government awesomeness you were subjected to in 4th grade. You want real history and economics. Well, learn in your car from professors you can trust with Tom Woods' Liberty Classroom. And if you join through the Liberty Classroom link at scotthorton.org, we'll make a donation to support The Scott Horton Show. Liberty Classroom, the history and economics they didn't teach you.
Hey everybody, Scott Horton here. Ever think maybe your group should hire me to give a speech? Well, maybe you should. I've got a few good ones to choose from, including How to End the War on Terror, The Case Against War with Iran, Central Banking and War, Uncle Sam and the Arab Spring, the ongoing war on civil liberties, and of course, why everything in the world is Woodrow Wilson's fault. But I'm happy to talk about just about anything else you've ever heard me cover on the show as well. So check out youtube.com/Scott Horton Show for some examples, and email Scott at scotthorton.org for more details. Hey, y'all, Scott here. First of all, thanks to the show's sponsors and donors who make it possible for me to do this. Secondly, I need more sponsors and more donors if the show is to continue. ScottHorton.org/donate has all the links to use PayPal, Give.org, Google Wallet, WePay.com, and even Bitcoins to make a donation in any amount. You can also sign up for monthly donations of small and medium-sized amounts through PayPal and Give.org. Again, that's ScottHorton.org/donate for all the links. To advertise on the site or the show, email me, Scott at ScottHorton.org. And thanks. All right, y'all. Welcome back to the show. I'm Scott Horton. ScottHorton.org is the website. You can follow me on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube at /Scott Horton Show. Also, hey, check out my written interview in the Washington Times, at least on the Washington Times website, Libertarian America. Scott Horton on the American Empire. That's part 2. Forgot what the first one was called. But anyway, you can find them both there. Just search my name in Washington Times. You might like it. A couple of the quotes have been going around Facebook. I like that. Okay. So, introducing our next guest. It's Nathan Fuller. He's been covering the military court-martial of Bradley Manning for BradleyManning.org. Welcome back to the show. How's it going?
It's going great. Thanks for having me again.
Well, I really appreciate you making the time to come on the show and keep us updated, Nathan, a lot. Let's see. What I know is that Lamo the Rat a couple of weeks ago had to admit on the stand that Manning meant well, that there was no espionage here. He even admitted that he had tried to tempt Manning into betraying his country, and Manning wouldn't hear of it. All he wanted to do was tell the American people the truth so that they could do the right thing, and Lamo admitted there wasn't anything like a hole in that story. He's a good kid. He meant well. That was established. Then the government's case already was falling apart, where they tried to say, see, he was working with Assange to commit espionage, and the proof of that is this Excel sheet. And then, no, on cross-examination, his commanding officer said, no, I ordered him to make the Excel sheet. It had nothing to do with Julian Assange. And then there were a few more things like that. But then something about they kind of called off the hearings for a little while, or the trial appearances in the courtroom for a little while, just to push papers back and forth? I never was clear on what happened there. And then anything else you can tell us. I'm going to be quiet now, and you just let us know.
That's a pretty good summary, I'd say. We have had a recess for nearly the last week because, as you say, the government and defense are working on stipulations of expected testimony. At least 17 more of the government witnesses, they're writing up stipulations for what they expect those witnesses would say, and then they're going to read them in court. The government only has about 30 or so witnesses left. It's already called more than 33, and they initially said they'd have 140, but we think they only have about 30 left for the merits phase, the guilt or innocence portion. So it's possible tomorrow we're going to resume with the government witnesses. Today we just had a brief oral argument. But tomorrow we're resuming with witnesses, and then the government's case for the merits could be over by the end of this week, by this Friday. And so then the defense would have a brief turn to bring its witnesses, then there would be a ruling, and then we get into the sentencing phase. And that's where the bulk of the defense witnesses are going to come to try to mitigate any potential sentence, to talk about harm or lack thereof.
Mm-hmm. Now, I'm looking at your coverage from the 18th here, and this is another example. This time, some tweets by WikiLeaks of here's some information we're looking for or something. And it sounds like what you're reporting here is another instance of the government's case not holding up at all under cross-examination. And in fact, kind of in a ridiculous way, where, like, come on, man, you got to be able to anticipate that the defense is going to point out that they haven't proven that Manning even ever saw these tweets. So what does it matter what they said? You know what I mean? Like, this is ridiculous. And so is it... Do they even have a case at all? Is every piece of evidence the state puts forward here just withering under Coombs' cross-examination, or what?
Thus far, it's been surprisingly weak. It's been, these, not only can they not show that Manning ever saw these, which would make them totally irrelevant for the merit portion, but they can't even authenticate the way that they were retrieved. The government says that it used the Internet Archive, the Wayback Machine, and Google Cache. But then under cross-examination had trouble explaining that process, and so they might not even be admitted if they were relevant. But again, as you say, Bradley Manning, there's no proof that he saw these tweets, and that severely undercuts this government allegation that he was working at Assange's behest. And so we have not seen any compelling evidence thus far that goes to that theory. And so I'd be pretty surprised at this point if that theory holds up.
You know, I guess, Nathan, I've just seen too many movies, because somewhere I imagine these prosecutors actually sitting at a table and going over their own case and seeing if it holds up to the slightest bit of scrutiny before they go taking it into a courtroom, you know? But apparently that's not how it works.
Apparently not. I don't know. I mean, the Judge Denise Lynn does often take the government line as far as legal theories go, but she's going to have a hard time taking in evidence that is not proven relevant.
All right, so now what happened today?
So today there was this brief oral argument over the defense and government each brought items of judicial notice. So they wanted the court to take notice of a few things. And one important thing that the defense brought was a letter from Rear Admiral Kevin Donegan to the Secretary of the Army, and that's going to rebut testimony that the government previously brought. The government had testimony from an Apache pilot saying that the collateral murder video revealed what are called TTPs, tactics, techniques, and procedures, and he said that those were a piece of the puzzle that if the enemy saw, they could put together how our Apache operations work and could then learn more and prevent against attacks and things like that. But then we have a letter from a Rear Admiral to the Secretary of the Army saying from the defense is putting this forth, saying that no TTPs, no techniques, tactics, or procedures were in that video. And so the government tried to object on that, and we'll hear a ruling on that later this week. So we have testimony directly contradicting what the government says here.
Wow. So, man, I need to open up a new... they got these great sticky notes for Windows 7 where you just put them up on your on your desktop there, and they stay forever. I need to start a new one of those, which is examples of pieces of the state's case that have fallen apart already. And it's getting too long. The list is getting too long already for me to remember them all. Can you give us some more, please? This is fun, kind of. I mean, I know they're going to convict the poor kid anyway, but still.
Well, another important one has been over the Guarani airstrike video. The government has said from the start that it can prove that Bradley Manning released, that there were two transmissions, that Manning released this video in November of 2009 and April of 2010. And just, again, this video is, and this incident is a really horrific incident in Afghanistan. A U.S. airstrike killed what reporters say is between 86 and 140 Afghan civilians, most of them women and children. It's really disturbing. But so the government says that there were two transmissions. The defense says there's no proof of that. There's only the April 2010 transmission. And then when the government's witness came on the stand, he actually corroborated what the defense was saying, and that there was not evidence of a November 2009 transmission. And while it seems like a minor point, it really goes to the government's theory that as soon as he got in Iraq in November of 2009, he started leaking almost right away, and that he was just working for WikiLeaks and was just harvesting information. But the evidence doesn't show that right now.
Very, very important. So there's this entire other video. We're not talking about the collateral murder video from East Baghdad. We're talking about the Guarani airstrike video from Afghanistan. And this is one that I believe you reported here at BradleyManning.org, Nathan, that when Manning pleaded guilty and testified why he did it and everything, and stipulated to all the facts, that he specifically objected to this one charge and pleaded not guilty to this and explained that, I just didn't do that. I'd be happy to take responsibility for it if I did, but I didn't. I don't know if he said that out loud, but that was at least in government in his defense papers, right? And the government decided they were going to go with this, but again, they didn't double check their work, and their own witness admitted on the stand they had no evidence that he transmitted that video.
Right, and we'll see if they have any other evidence to bring forth, but thus far it is not conclusive, and so that's going to be pretty hard for them to do. It seems like they should have just gone ahead with the 2010 release, but they were so stubborn in trying to prove this several months long harvesting of information that it kind of hurt them. They kicked themselves in the foot essentially by mischarging this.
Amazing. I mean, like you're saying, it doesn't even sound like a minor footnote. It might to somebody, but you're right. I mean, when everything hinges on, they're trying to make the case of the all-important date here. If he did upload the Guarani video, it was way back before what he's admitted to doing. And so it's a whole part of their big conspiracy theory. In other words, it's another huge example of the government prosecutors here, the military prosecutors, having no idea what they're talking about.
It certainly seems they don't have quite the evidence to back up their theories, at least not yet, but there's time yet.
Amazing. I mean, and again, he's pleaded guilty to numerous facts. Maybe you can help with the discrepancy about what he's pleaded guilty to and what he's pleaded not guilty to. But mainly the discrepancy is he's pleaded not guilty to aiding the enemy because he sure as hell didn't do that.
Right. He's basically pleading guilty to and taking responsibility for releasing the main WikiLeaks releases, the Iraq and Afghanistan war logs, the Gitmo detainee files, the State Department cables, and he says, yes, I did give these to, and the Apache, the collateral murder video, because yes, I did give them to WikiLeaks, but the way the government's charging is not accurate, because the government says that he stole it, he did not have authorized access to get these information, that he intended for it to harm the U.S. or be to the advantage of a foreign nation. And he says that is a completely false interpretation, and he only did it for the public good. So they kind of agree on the basic forensic fact of that, the fact that he did, except for this, the state switch, that he did release the information. It's just going to come down to the important stuff is what that means and what the effect was and what his intentions were. And yeah, he certainly pled not guilty to aiding the enemy because that had, there's just no basis for that.
Right. Now, in terms of military procedure, obviously they got, for example, they've done trumped up espionage cases, charges, which eventually kind of withered away against, I think, Drake and Tam, the NSA whistleblowers. They're pursuing that avenue right now against Snowden, who also is just talking to newspapers. And not, committing espionage. But I wonder, in the context of a military court, is it customary at all, or is this also kind of a pretty unprecedented application of aiding the enemy / espionage charges against someone who leaks a classified document for what are obviously pure whistleblower reasons rather than any kind of Jonathan Pollard type treason?
Yeah, no, this is an unprecedented interpretation, and it seems the Espionage Act in particular is a favorite tactic by the Obama administration, and to use it for leakers more than any other president combined. Other presidents combined. But
you're saying under military law too. In the military court setting, it's also unprecedented. It's not only just in the federal court system.
Well, the aiding the enemy is unprecedented. I mean, when the government says that they do have a precedent, they go back to the Civil War, sometime around, I'm not sure exactly the year, but Civil War era. One soldier gave a roster of military information to a newspaper, and they printed that. And apparently, he was convicted of aiding the enemy, and he got 4 months of just work labor. And that's the only precedent they have for this aiding the enemy for leaking information. So that's really the only precedent that they have to set, and nothing in our modern era.
Mm-hmm. Well, and even that precedent is directly doing exactly what Manning did not do, which is, put people in danger by, revealing sources and methods and names and locations, etc.
Exactly, and it was also revealed that in these, the government loves to say that the releasing of the Iraq and Afghanistan war logs put sources at risk, but we learned that the names that the people in the Iraq and Afghanistan war logs were actually identified by number and not by name. So he was not revealing U.S. source names.
Right. So, I mean, I think that's an important point, and one that maybe I already knew that, but I hadn't really focused on that. Obviously we have this unprecedented crusade against whistleblowers and the journalists who would report on the facts that they bring to us going on. But most of it is really, separate from this court system entirely, right? It's all in the civilian court system, its own set of problems and charges and whatever. But Manning, so I think you had already told me that in the past too, but it hadn't gotten through my thick skull yet. That really the only precedent they have for this, even in the military court system, they have to go back to the Civil War, and then then it's not even an applicable type of case history anyway. It doesn't seem like.
And that on its face should just prove how ridiculous and overbroad they're charging this, but when you look at the specifics, the government has to prove, their burden of proof is that Manning had, quote, actual knowledge that giving information to WikiLeaks meant giving it to Al-Qaeda. And I just don't see how that's going to hold up. But I guess we'll see in court.
Well, I don't know if I don't know if they could prove this, but it seems a reasonable assumption that anyone could imagine that something published in The Guardian or the New York Times by word of mouth or somehow would end up in, Zawahiri's basement where he's hiding in Pakistan somewhere or whatever, that knowledge could eventually get to them. But just as long as that's not the point, just as long as it's not all some secret code to let Zawahiri know what he needs to know or something like that, then that doesn't matter, right? That's that should be the real line of argument, because I don't think anybody could say that he thought that Al-Qaeda has never heard of a newspaper or internet before and that they would never be able to learn anything from this. That wouldn't be the line of argument. It would just be that, you know what, that's, they're in 10th place on the list and they're not what's important here. What's important is the American people have the information that they can decide whether they think these are wise policies or not, because that's what's first and foremost here. Right,
and that's what Manning has said all along, and people like to say that he contrived this motive after the fact, and that he was only saying that in his statement in February just to make himself look better. But it actually tracks really well with the chats that he gave in private to Adrian Lamo. He says information deserves to be free, and that's why information should be public, and without it, we can't make informed decisions, and that's been his motive all along.
Right. And then I don't know if anybody's done the comparison on the timeline of or if we even know exactly at what point Lamo went to the military or I guess it went to the FBI or whoever and was began reporting to them what was going on in his chat with Manning. I think it was probably after that, but he attempted to tempt Manning with the dark side, right? He said, hey, why don't you make some money? Sell these secrets to the Russians or the Chinese. And Manning says, no way. And he admitted that on the stand, that Manning was like, no. That is not what this is about at all.
Exactly.
Forget it.
Yep. We think that Lamo went to the authorities within 1 or 2 days of talking to Manning. So it's unclear if on the second day of chats he was under the direction of some FBI agent or something like that. But we think we probably just tempted him on his own. Manning quickly and assertively refuted that because that was in no way his intention.
Yeah, I mean, he really does elaborate. He talks about the state. He talks about war crimes in Iraq that he was even ordered to participate in. He talks about what he considers to be near criminal behavior, at least by the State Department in their dealings with every other country in the world. He's basically just shocked and amazed and astounded at this other reality at the secret level in the documents that, geez, I think the American people might need to know this stuff. I mean, you couldn't make up a story for pure whistleblower motives displayed better than the way they came across in those chat logs. You just read them, there's no doubt who you're dealing with there, and that he means what he says about that.
Exactly. It's pure whistleblower motive. People like to say that he's not a whistleblower because it's so much more information, but the fact is he just saw so much more abusive and corrupt activity than he was complicit in, and decided that people had to know about it.
Yep. All right, so now... are there any more examples of the state trying to make a case and then Coombs whoops him on the cross?
I think we reviewed the major ones, although I'm kind of interested to see what comes of the Guantanamo detainee assessment briefs. The government has to prove that the releasing those was revealing closely held national defense information, but as the defense established, the enemy already knew all that information. They knew which of their, which detainees that we had and were keeping. That was not exactly secret. These assessment briefs were just biographical information. Manning thought that they would be useful for Gitmo lawyers, and I'm going to be interested to see if the government has anything to show that these revealed anything more than just basic biographical info.
Uh-huh. And that's the one that's coming up. And then, so then the question will be, well, can you show us where any jihadists anywhere said, hey, look, see, they do have my cousin Tim or whatever? No, probably not.
Yeah, I don't expect so.
Yeah.
So,
I don't know if there are any Al-Qaeda guys named Tim.
In the sentencing phase.
Yeah. All right. Well, and I'm sorry to say this, I know I ain't bearing bad news to you, but it's just such a bummer that none of this matters. They're going to lock this guy up forever and ever. I always call him a kid just because he's younger than me, and I like to pretend I'm still young, even though I'm not. But this young man, they're going to lock him up for decades. They're not going to give him points off for holding him for 3 years without trial, or for abusing him, or for all the command influence over his officer judge. And they're not going to, I don't want to be too pessimistic about the possibility of the defense putting on a great mitigating circumstances case during sentencing and what have you. But it's almost a foregone conclusion. It's pretty much a foregone conclusion because this is really a political case. It's not a legal case. That's why the command influence doesn't matter. That's why the 3 years without trial doesn't matter, is because it's a foregone conclusion here. Like the 9/11 Commission. We're not here to place blame. We just want you to recommend a Department of Homeland Security at the end. You know what I mean? It's already decided.
Well, that's generally how the state works, yeah. But I'm holding out hope. I mean, it did, with international protests, we did get Manning out of abusive detention in Quantico, and we're going to be holding a protest, an emergency protest upon conviction, and there's going to be an appeals process. So I'm not giving up yet. Gonna try to get him at least a reduced sentence, if not something better.
Yeah, never mind my pessimism. If anything, that should just make everybody angry and want to fight back against the bogus non-truth that I just thought was true out loud. I mean, come on, fight back and win. This guy, it ought to be 300 million Americans. Well, I guess, what are there, 10 million government employees? It ought to be 290 million Americans versus the state on this one. This guy's a hero, what he's done for us.
I think so, and I think if people do come out, if people do come to an emergency protest, we can make a difference a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, listen, you're doing a great job, man. I can't tell you how much I appreciate the work that you do at BradleyManning.org and your time that you continue to provide for us on the show, updating us on this story, Nathan. It's great stuff.
No problem. Happy to. Appreciate you having me.
Great. Everybody, that is the heroic Nathan Fuller, and I would like you to look at BradleyManning.org and then Courtroom Notes. If you just look right there on the front page, you'll find the link, Courtroom Notes. And this is Nathan Fuller, his day-by-day coverage of the military court-martial of the American hero Bradley Manning. And you just can't do better than that. And also, and I admit I'm really behind on this, but you should know that at the Freedom of the Press Foundation, at pressfreedomfoundation.com, I know that's frustrating, but anyway, go there, and they have the transcripts, and people have donated a lot of money so that those transcripts are available to journalists. In fact, if you know a journalist, why not spam them with the transcripts and challenge them to get to work on reporting this story? It's all there at pressfreedomfoundation.com, the transcripts, and the government has made the public and the press pay for the court reporters. The government will not provide the court reporters. So people are donating. You can still chip in to that effort. Make sure that they continue to be able to afford these court reporters. And it's really expensive to have them in there to do that work. So, but anyway, all those transcripts are there. And I started to admit, and then I didn't finish that part of the sentence, did I? I admit I haven't read them all. I admit I haven't read jack except for what Nathan's written here at BradleyManning.org in preparation for that interview and previous ones. Well, there's a lot of different horrible things going on in the world. One of them is the trial of Bradley Manning. Quote-unquote trial. Poor kid. Anyway, and in case you didn't know, or you were subject to some lying, ridiculous propaganda or whatever, here's what you should know about Bradley Manning. He was over there going to being a good little soldier, and he was ordered to participate in the kidnapping and torture of an innocent man. Not like it's okay to kidnap and torture guilty men. But in this case, it was a guy who just written an op-ed criticizing the prime minister in the new democratic Iraq. Saying, where did the money go? Boy, this Nouri al-Maliki sure makes a lot of money, but where is it all? I can't find it anywhere. You know, the kind of thing that you might want to write for your local newspaper about the mayor. Or about the president. And they were turning him over to be tortured by the Wolf Brigade death squad. Maybe they're going to put a drill in his eyeball. And Bradley Manning said, hey, boss. You should know what's going on here. My translator said that this article is harmless. It's just an op-ed piece wondering where did the money go? And I'm pretty sure that they're going to take this guy away and torture him maybe to death. And Bradley Manning's commanding officer said, get back to work doing that. And go and help them arrest and detain and torture more people too. Those are your orders, son. Now get to it. You understand? He was ordered to participate in war crimes. He was honor bound to do something about that. Hoorah. He had no other choice. It's what George Washington would have had him do. Leak the documents, son. Okay, maybe not. I don't know. George Washington was probably pretty bad on classified document stuff. But actually, he was good on empires. Well, at least when they were foreign ones on our soil. I don't know if he ever could see it the other way around or not. He might just be a Republican these days. But anyway, Manning did the right thing. The right thing. And in fact, you know what? If you're the kind of person where you tend to lean toward how dare you steal the government secrets, you've got a real problem. I think actually your problem probably is that you're living in an imaginary America where this government is your friend and is here to protect you and is the same thing as the country. I'm just here to tell you that ain't true. The government's the government, the country's the country, and these guys are bad guys. The current administration and the last 12 before that and more. They're not looking out for you. They never were. Bradley Manning accepted. All right, see you tomorrow. Thanks for listening. Welcome to the show. How's it going? I'm Scott Horton. This is my show, The Scott Horton Show. Thanks for tuning in. Should be a good one here in just a few minutes. Nathan Fuller will be joining us. He's covering the Bradley Manning trial for bradleymanning.org. Nathan Fuller. And then got Brianna over there at the ACLU's New York office working on trying to line me up somebody. We got 3 different very important stories to cover with the ACLU today. If I can swing it. Well, I got a couple hours, so maybe it'll work out. Some very important news. Yeah, I'm a day behind, but I want to cover this, the DNA ruling with somebody who really knows about it. Ain't that something, man? When Antonin Scalia is the last thing protecting your liberty and then he fails, you know? It's bad times. I don't think we should have a Supreme Court. How come the Supreme Court gets to say horrible things about how we all have to live and then it goes? What about screw them and their pretended legitimacy? I know. It's like questioning the virginity of Christ's mom and all of that, right? The virginity, the divinity. What do you mean the Supreme Court is just 9 police state hangman rope thugs and that we'd be better off without their existence at all? Blasphemy. Anyway, well, that's what I think. They are no good. And now, what would it take to undo this decision? I guess I should say this. It's a rhetorical question for you. It'll be an actual question for the ACLU guy. I think Congress would have to pass a law limiting the jurisdiction of the Supreme Court. in this case, or in cases like this, and just say they have no jurisdiction to decide that DNA grabs without warrants